أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأزواجه وذرياته وأهل بيته ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وبعد. So we start now with the module in the Murshid al-Mu'in that has to do with Aqidah. And so it has some prerequisites to talking about Aqidah, and then there are some consequences to talking about Aqidah that interface with the study of fiqh. And so we'll go through a little bit of all of that. So just like I have another playlist entitled Remedial Tasawwuf, this is a playlist if I wanted to just these introductory topics to the book, the rest of which is very plainly Maliki fiqh. But in these kind of next few durus and lessons, if I were to entitle them separately than being lessons on the Murshid al-Mu'in of Abdul Wahid ibn ʿāshir rahimahullah tabarak wa ta'ala, I would have entitled them Remedial Kalām. And the reason I say Remedial Kalām rather than Remedial Aqidah, although there's a recitation of the Aqaid of Islam a little bit further into this module, but the way he has laid out his approach to Aqidah is a versification of Imam Sanūsī, not the Tariqa Sanūsiyya of the later times that fought against the Italians and Sidi Umar Mukhtar, rahimahumullah tabarak wa ta'ala, Allah ta'ala accept from them. But this is an earlier Sanūsī, Muhammad bin Yusuf al-Sanūsī, who was from Tilimsan, which is, I guess, nowadays on the border between Morocco and Algeria, on the Algerian side. It was a major metropolis of the Maghrib in the Middle Ages. It's still an important city, but it's kind of taken a back seat now compared to what its position used to be, both intellectually and politically in the past. And so Sayyid Muhammad bin Yusuf Sanūsī rahimahullah tabarak wa ta'ala, he wrote an entire syllabus of Kalām texts. And the story about him was that he was a learned scholar, but he was more inclined toward zuhd, toward asceticism and piety, and he lived kind of separate from the people, and he wasn't really a man of the dunya. And so somebody apparently one time made a comment in his majlis about, getting too much into proofs and getting too much into reason is kind of missing the point when it comes to Islam, and somehow or another we should all be like, just take faith and just like go with it instead of like talk about proofs too much or whatever. And is there really any way to prove these things? You have to just know them inside or whatever. And the sheikh was like, no, that's not how this works. And in fact, that is the deen of the Nasara, it's the deen of the Christians. And sadly, I've seen a lot of like talking heads, some of them in this very Chicago of ours, that have platform and say these types of, regurgitate these types of, frankly, irresponsible and, I don't want to use bad words, I don't want to call people stupid because it's not, it's not good character or whatever, but, they say these statements which contain very, very high levels of incorrectness in them. Let's put it that way. And so he wrote a number of texts basically explaining why the belief in Allah Ta'ala is a very reasonable belief and why you have to know it through reason to the point of yaqeen. It shouldn't be blind faith or something that's ghalabat al-dhann, something that you think is probably true and is kind of like a probabilistic, a probabilistic like calculation that if I die nothing happens, then that's fine, but if I die and God's there, so I should have my bases covered. It shouldn't be like that. Rather, if you read the Quran itself and if you read the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, one of the mutaradifat, one of the synonyms for iman is yaqeen. And so this is one reason I think translating iman as faith, obviously it's a correct translation, but I think it's suboptimal in the sense that faith and conviction both involve contextually attachment to a number of things in this particular civilization, which dominates the language we're teaching in right now. And it has this connotation of, well, it's something that may defy reason, or something may be beyond reason, or something that is not necessarily verified or even verifiable by reason. Whereas that's not the case at all when it comes to Islam. Your faith in Allah Ta'ala is the faith of a believer if it is solid conviction. And if it's something that's probabilistic or just a feeling, but you don't feel that this is the only way things could have been and there's no other way things could have been, then what you have is something more akin to what is the state of a munafiq, of a hypocrite, in the sense that, like in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, when the munafiq is questioned in his grave about who is your Lord and what is your deen and what do you say about the Prophet ﷺ, he'll say, I don't know, I just used to say what other people said. And so this is not a good place to be in. Now, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, bleep, this is where I am right now. Are you calling me munafiq? Cancelled, unmasked. No, bhai, look, everybody is where they are. And we're here to work with people. The point of making these videos is not that everybody's already perfect, so like let's talk about how bad people are or whatever, right? At some point or another, people haven't thought through these issues. And so instead of thinking about it like adversarially or in the context of like, your childhood when, you felt like your mother should have paid more attention to you or whatever. All that stuff you can talk to your therapist about if you want to change that condition inside of you, or you want to help other people change that condition inside of themselves, then reading this module will be of benefit, because Allah Ta'ala bless the mashayikh who learned from the aslaf, who learned from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless him and give him peace, and that of those who carried his message afterward. Allah Ta'ala sent him with a way of systematizing and putting forth some points of information that make that process easy. But the problem is, until you go through it, until you think about it, until you try to reason through it, you'll never know. And what I'll say is this: is a lot of people are reticent to talk about aqidah, and they're reticent to talk in particular about Kalām, about the rational end of ilm al-Kalām, in any context other than, I said it, now shut up and believe it, They're reticent to talk about things in any context other than that. Why? Because they're afraid that people are not going to get it, or they're not going to agree with it, or they're not going to understand it, and it's going to somehow cause some sort of jumbling of beliefs or of creed, or cause people to leave Islam. And I don't think that's the case. There's a lot of boogeyman around learning ilm al-Kalām, even sadly amongst people who present themselves in the public as scholars and as students of knowledge and as pious people. And I think it's completely useless and unnecessary. I can understand a little bit of where they're coming from, and we'll talk about that maybe a little bit. But in general, I think it's on the whole very wrong. And in fact, because people are so unsophisticated in the way they think about Allah Ta'ala, and so unsophisticated in the way that they think about the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, that they get taken for a ride by people who really don't know anything about the deen of Islam. They just need to throw up some cultural Islamic-y trappings around them, dress a certain way, say the ayn a certain way, or grow a beard or whatever. And now all of a sudden, everything is Islamiced out enough that people think that this is Islam, and it's not. And we all know that your Islam is not your beard, it's not your hijab, it's not your jilbab, it's not your niqab, it's not your jubba or your qubba. It's not any of those things. Rather, it's a light that a person carries inside of their heart. And that light is more properly connected with the aqidah of the Muslims and with the tasawwuf of the Muslims, the tazkiyah of the Muslims, tasawwuf in the sense of the kitab and sunnah, not necessarily the cultural sense or the official sense, that imperial sense that develops over the centuries. And so we want to talk about what is the life of a person's intellect when it comes to Islam and when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And a disclaimer before going deeper into this discussion is that ilm al-Kalām is probably the most deep well of study from all of the different subjects of formal subjects of Islamic learning. So fiqh, you can get really into the reasoning of why rulings are a particular way and why they're not a particular way, and what the parsing and gradations and differences of things are that many people find overwhelming. That part of fiqh is 100% derived from aqidah in general, and in particular ilm al-Kalām. And just like that, the abstruse discussions of tasawwuf, not all of which are invalid or wrong, but many of which are not necessary for the average person, and the person finds them overwhelming and overbearing and confusing, and they have a right to not spend too much time getting into them. Those are the interface of what? Of Kalām with tasawwuf. And when it comes to sectarian debates, when it comes to polemics, you can go very deep down the rabbit hole. And in fact, many of the Sunni ulama have gone to ends that a normal person would find bizarre in order to defend the aqaid of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah in a way that are so far from what the original discussion is. People wonder what the connection is between this and the original discussion, even though if you study, you'll see there are connections. But a normal person will be lost on them. So when you put out a lesson on one of these topics, there's always somebody who says this is too much, we don't need it. And I beg to differ. Actually, what I'm trying to focus on are the things that are not too much, that are needed for basically every Muslim who is alive in the time and place that we're alive in today, and the circumstances we're alive in today. Yes, maybe if somebody lives in a village in Punjab that hasn't gotten electricity yet, many of these discussions are unnecessary for such a person. But for the rest of us, no matter how educated or uneducated on Islam we might be, we're already all exposed to TikTok, we're already all exposed to Facebook and Twitter, and to discussions that really a normal person wouldn't have been exposed to before now. And I don't believe in hiding your head in the sand. Once the cat's out of the bag, we have to talk about all of these things, because if you don't talk about them, the people of Batil are talking about them anyway. So there are some people who complain this is too much detail. I beg to differ. On the flip side, there will be some people who complain, oh, this is not detailed enough, you got a lot of the details wrong, or you should talk more about this, or this is actually XYZ, and they'll unfold like an entire hidden universe in their pocket of discussions with regards to just one thing I casually said. And I say for such people, this is a class on what? It's Kalām 99. This is remedial Kalām. If you want to take the Kalām 101, Mayara, who is one of the students of Ibn ʿāshir, direct student, who wrote this work of art, this commentary on Mayara's, on Ibn ʿāshir by Mayara, الدر الثمين والمورد المعين. Go ahead and read it. And what he does in the commentary is he will explain the points that are enumerated one by one in the nazm that we're going to read in the verse of Ibn ʿāshir. And he will do something very unique, which is what Sanūsī, when he wrote this entire syllabus of Ilm al-Kalām, in order to get people to stop saying that we take these things on blind faith, and to get them to understand deeply with yaqeen that these things are all rationally sound and necessary, he wrote an entire syllabus. So there's a Sanūsiyat al-Sughra and Wusta and Kubra, and then he wrote Shuruhat, he wrote commentaries on them, and he wrote other than longer works on Ilm al-Kalām. And it kind of started an entire revolution in the Maghrib with regards to Ash'ari Kalām, which was there from before, but before the Sanūsī syllabus was in vogue. The main source of Kalām was actually not Ghazali, it was Imam al-Haramain, his teacher, who's a very underappreciated intellect in the history of Islam. And his Irshad is just an amazing book that also deserves study and deserves to be read. He has obviously a number of other books that are, I think it's not an exaggeration to say, are nothing short of miraculous in the level of organization and illumination that they give to a number of topics in a way that other people really haven't thought about before, all of which is there in the Sunnah, but only the person whose eyes and hearts are open will see it. But the Sanūsī, Imam Sanūsī rahimahullah ta'ala, qaddasallahu sirrahu, his syllabus basically revolutionized the study of Kalām and made tajdeed, it renewed it amongst the Maghariba. So what Mayara does is he basically pours through the whole corpus of Sanūsī's works, and he will write a commentary on his sheikh's versification of the Sanūsiyat al-Sughra, which in the opinion of many learned scholars, is actually a better commentary, using Sanūsī's words to comment on Sanūsī's words in a way that better than the way Sanūsī did. So it's actually better explanation than Sanūsī's own commentary on Sanūsīyat al-Sughra, which is, I guess, somewhat of a subjective claim. But the point is that he does try to bring Sanūsī's own explanation of his own points in the way that he ordered this syllabus of his. And so you can, so if you want to read 101, go ahead and grab a copy of the Dur al-Thameen of Mayara and read that. Beyond that, there are many very long and very complicated books of Kalām, and the discussions go really deep in all sorts of different directions. If you want to, write the death sentence to me for not having attained the deepest level of appreciation or understanding or even dhabt in regards to those things, then inshallah, just send me an email and I'll, fix the appointment with you to go to the gallows. I already admit that I'm guilty from the very get-go. This is a very low-level primer that's there to help the awam. The specialists can, inshallah, keep going into their specializations later and later, and I don't think that they're bad. I think people should study them. I do see some people go off the rails from time to time, but that happens in ilm, especially for people who don't have a sheikh, to try to help them work through what they learn, or they have a sheikh that's not a very good sheikh. And then some people are very special, they have special nufus, there's no sheikh in the world that's going to be able to help them. They're just going to go off the rails anyway. And may Allah Ta'ala be our protection from all of those perils. Ameen. And then, we'll try to mention some of the differences of opinions between the Ash'ari school and between the Maturidi school, but again, it's not the purpose of going into it. The only reason I mention where difference of opinion occurs is so that you don't get into a fight with anybody. This is not, there's a level of Kalām that is weaponizable and should be weaponized, in the sense that it's a defense of the aqaid of Islam against the people of Batil, right? This is not that level. This level a person should read for their own benefit. If they want to do all of that other stuff, if they want to defend the deen or whatever, there's a lot of study that still needs to be done. You can't just be some random person who popped up out of the middle of nowhere and just talks about how modernism is all crap, and now all of a sudden you're the defender of Islam. We have a couple of individuals like that, most of whom have already gone off the rails in front of our eyes, the rest of whom are just waiting. Don't be the person who talks first and learns later. Rather, learn first, and then you can decide whether or not your speech has benefit in it afterward. This is not that level of Kalamic study. Rather, learn this for your own benefit, and then another side benefit is that it will be a stepping stone for you to be able to better understand your 101 level studies of Kalām, and then when you achieve a certain level, then when you speak, inshallah, there will be benefit in it, even if you disagree with others or others disagree with you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq. So the first fasl, the first kind of section in this module is a section regarding the hukm aqli. And so we'll read the abiyat, inshallah, and then we'll talk about their meanings. Would you like to read, inshallah? Go ahead, Ahmed, read.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وحكمنا العقلي قضية بلا وقف على عادة أو وضع جلا، أقسام مقتضاه بالحصر تماز، وهي الوجوب الاستحالة الجواز، فواجب لا يقبل النفي بحال، وما أبى الثبوت عقلا المحال، وجائزا ما قابل الأمرين سم، وللضرور والنظر كل قسم.
Okay, so the first section of this module is essentially a 98, 97 level survey of certain issues in what would probably normally be studied in mantiq, in logic, in formal logic, Aristotelian logic, classical logic, whatever you want to call it. And, reading logic, someone says, well, oh look, ilm al-kalam, this is all Greek philosophy. You already mentioned Aristotle, and we all know Aristotle was a kafir and going to hell or whatever. And I said, look, I guess there are some of the Mu'tazila that said that these people are anbiya. I find it very far-fetched that Plato and Aristotle were anbiya. I guess I wasn't around, and I don't know. And if people can fabricate hadith about the Prophet ﷺ, they can fabricate anything about anyone. And if you want to know how much people lie, just turn on your TV or news or internet or whatever. But yes, I do find it far-fetched. All of that, given all of that at the same time, I still find it far-fetched that they were prophets or anything. But they did systematize the agreed upon precepts of rationality that everybody agrees on anyway. And they systematized it, so they give us a convention through which we can communicate these concepts with one another. And that doesn't in any way, shape, or form influence what we believe or what we don't believe. And I don't see any problem with that. And really, every person uses reasoning, whether the formal language with which they describe it is Aristotelian or not. Everybody uses reasoning. At any rate, the human being is a hayawan natiq, even according to their convention. He's the what? He's the speaking animal, and he's the rational animal. And so even speech itself has certain rational assumptions that underpin it, without which, words can't really have meaning. It's an entire discussion. The point is that we're going to talk a little bit about certain precepts in logic, and they don't really influence what the beliefs are one way or the other. And so don't get thrown for this kind of red herring type of curveball that somehow or another ilm al-kalam is Greek philosophy. In fact, the only ones who refuted Greek philosophy properly were the mutakallimun. In fact, other schools and other strains, intellectual strains, actually strangely end up accepting many of the precepts of the peripatetic philosophers in their aqidah in weird and, in my opinion, very cringe-inducing ways. So this is a little primer on mantiq, it's a little primer on logic. And so he first says that we're talking about the hukm aqli. We're talking about the hukm aqli. The word hukm is like a ruling. In the sharia, when we say hukm shar'i, a thing can be haram, it can be makruh, it can be permissible, like mubah, it can be mustahab, recommended, and it can be fard. And there are like subcategories within those different designations. That's a ruling, and it's in the context of sharia. In the context of rationality, of reason, of logic, we also have a hukm, but instead of calling it a ruling, we'll call it a judgment. So rational judgment is our proposition at hand. So what we're talking about right now, وَحُكْمُنَا الْعَقْلِيُّ قَضِيَّةٌ بِلَا وَقْفٍ عَلَى عَادَةٍ أَوْ وَضْعٍ جَلَى. He says that the rational judgment is our proposition at hand. That's what we're talking about right now, without tarrying over natural norms or conventions. So these are two other realms in which a person can render judgment. One is ada, which are the natural norms of the universe. Those are the things that, for example, how gravity works, how temperature works, fire burns, ice is cool, positive attracts negative. If you do certain things, you'll get certain predictable outcomes. Things that are empirically verifiable, things that you can count, things that you can measure, things that you can perceive through your senses. All of those judgments, that set of judgments that fall under this hukm adi, natural norms, that's what all of those things. So we're not talking about any of those things. We, in our mind, first of all, separate out that that's not what we're talking about. Nor is it wada'. What is wada'? Wada' is a convention that's set. So, for example, there are conventions of the Sharia. For example, the Maghrib is 3 rak'ahs. Did it have to be 3 rak'ahs? Why is it 3 rak'ahs? Allah Ta'ala said so. He said it at 3 rak'ahs. It is what it is. And so we're not talking about that. The Sharia itself is a set of conventions that are not disconnected with rational or natural norms, but at the same time, it's set by convention. Language is convention. So why is it that, you say, I saw me, and you don't say me saw I? These are all conventions. There's a reason you say I saw me, and you don't say me saw I. But why is it that the order is one way or not the other? These are all conventions. They don't necessarily need to be that way. You can set a different convention and language still makes sense. In that sense, something to think about, which maybe, I guess, go over people's heads so you don't have to kill yourself to think about it if it doesn't make sense to you the first time. But many of the things in the natural world are also They seem to be conventions that are set by the Creator. They don't have to be the way that they are. So for example, has a person wondered ever, why is it that gravity attracts things and it doesn't repel things? Allah knows best. If gravity repelled things, none of the physics that underpins the universe will necessarily fall apart. You just have to shift polarities on things. You just have to shift the, something from positive, a number from positive to negative. Math still works, right? Whereas rationality, something rationality, if it gets changed, then nothing makes sense whatsoever anymore. And that fact will become clear. So for example, like what is a rational judgment? So it says, أقسام مقتضاه بالحصر تماز وهي الوجوب والاستحالة الجواز. The issuant judgments, rational judgments, can only be one of three distinct possibilities. So rationality is fundamentally concerned with understanding the nature of something with regards to three possibilities. One is that something is necessary. Second is something is impossible. The third is that something is possible. So, a very simple example of something that is necessary. So 2 is greater than 1. 3 is greater than 2. This is 100% necessary. If someone says, well, 3 isn't greater than 2, then either the statement is wrong, or 3 doesn't mean what you think 3 means, and 2 doesn't mean what you think it means, and greater doesn't mean what greater thinks it means. The entire thing falls apart. So if, for example, gravity repelled things instead of attracted things, the universe would definitely look very different than what it is right now. However, still the math can all work. It would be internally consistent. Whereas with rationality, if we muddle the lines between things that are necessary, impossible, and possible, then nothing means what it means anymore, and all bets are off. Everything breaks down completely. That's what, when we say something is irrational, it means that level of breakdown. Satyanas ho jata hai. Satyanas is a curse we Desis use. I realize I'm the only Desi in the room right now. Tera satyanas ho jai. It literally means may like the fundamental reality that underpins your existence like come apart, which is a really mean thing to say. It's like better, to say like, I don't know, like I hope you like die or something like that, because this is, at this point a person doesn't know what to do anymore because nothing makes sense. At any rate, that's what happens. Satyanas happens when a person no longer is playing by rationality, and so logic starts here with this question of what is the judgment of a certain thing? Is it necessary? Is it impossible? Or is it possible? And then from there you can align those realizations in certain ways to be able to understand something about something you don't know firsthand through the way that these combinations align with one another. So for example, if you have 3 objects, you have object A, B, and C. If A is equal to, if you have a scale that weighs things out, right? So this is empirical verification, no rationality needed. You just put one object in one side of the scale, another object in the other side of the scale, assuming the scale is balanced. If one object doesn't outweigh the other, if they balance out, then you know that their weight is the same. So if A is equal to B and B is equal to C, necessarily what is the relationship between the weight of A and C? Equal. Not only is it equal, it has to be equal. There's no other way it could be. Either you screwed up the measurement of A and B, or you screwed up the measurement of B and C, or there's something wrong with the scale that it's not calibrated properly, or none of these words mean what you say they mean in the first place. If all of those prerequisite conditions are met, then A must equal C. You can verify it by putting A in one scale pan and C in the other scale pan afterward, but you don't need to verify it. As long as all these things are correct, then you know for a fact that A equals C. It's good to verify it sometimes because there are problems. Sometimes the scale isn't calibrated properly or whatever. But as long as all of those prerequisites are met, you know that A must equal C. This is an example of using this question of which of 3 judgments does something is something attached to. Is something necessary? Is it impossible? Or is it possible? using the alignments of those different permutations, using them, putting them together, combining them in order to arrive at knowledge that you didn't have firsthand from before, in order to arrive to it without having to empirically verify such knowledge. So rationality is a really powerful tool. Now, I want you to ponder for a second that the current state of this kind of post-Roman hegemonic civilization, the civilization that was carried on the shoulders of the British and the French, and then their successor, America, and the little other minor little players like Canada and like Scotland, Ireland, the rest of Western Europe, EU nations, or whatever, in whatever racial hierarchy they self-perceive with one another. And in the hierarchy of their kind of brown acolytes in much of the rest of the world, darker skinned or different phenotyped acolytes in the rest of the world, who seem to be basically running the show. Amongst them, the value of the study of logic and rationality is very low. The value of studying empiricism is very high. Whatever you can verify visually or through counting or measurement, this is real knowledge. The understanding of the way that you figure out and arrive at knowledge that involves understanding the relationships of the rational judgments of things to one another, in order to understand those things that you're not able to firsthand measure, and also to understand why and what the hierarchy and what the priority of causation and things like that are through that process. That's actually given very, very little importance, and that's why we have people who are philosophically kind of brain dead nowadays, even if they know a marvelous amount of knowledge about a particular section of nerve in the finger, or about how the currents of ice flow in Neptune. I would say the one planet in closer than that, but then people are going to snicker and laugh at it because it's going to become a dirty joke. So let's stick to Neptune for a while. And people are going to they know a marvelous amount of about a lot of things, but they don't really understand how they fit with one another all that well. يَعْلَمُونَ ظَاهِرًا مِنَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَهُمْ عَنِ الْآخِرَةِ هُمْ غَافِلُونَ. Allah Ta'ala describes the Romans to whom they aspire, who is the kind of the parent civilization to whom they aspire. So the Capitol building looks Roman. It has literally a statue of Athena on top of it, which I think is a pagan monstrosity. But that's just my opinion. Freedom of speech, First Amendment. The White House, the way the columns are, this is a Greco-Roman civilization that they all aspire to be some sort of like advancement of, or at least have some sort of nisbat toward, some connection toward. Allah Ta'ala describes them in the Quran as being people who know a lot about like surface level details regarding the life of this world, but when it comes to the hereafter, or something that's not zahir, something that's a little bit deeper in terms of understanding, they're relatively clueless people, relatively speaking. Man, there are some people amongst them that are really deep, but when you compare them to the deep people of our ummah, or of even other wisdom traditions amongst human beings, it's not really all that fulfilling. And so that's why, until like mechanized armies from Europe or from America showed up in many places in the world, there were not a lot of people who would go and say, oh, like, I'm going to go to Germany and learn how to become a better human being. Whereas those Germans will go to like India or China, or sometimes become Muslims, or sometimes go somewhere else in order to learn something about their humanity. The other way around rarely occurs, except for in the context of material bettering. But that's a separate culture war issue. Feel free to disagree with me with regards to that if you like. أقسام مقتضاه بالحصر تماز وهي الوجوب الاستحالة الجواز فواجب لا يقبل النفي بحال وما أبى الثبوت عقلا المحال. And so he says that there are three possibilities. Something is either necessary, impossible, or possible. That which cannot bear negation in any circumstance is necessary. That which abjures affirmation is impossible. وَجَائِزَ مَا قَبِلَ الْأَمْرَيْنِ sim. And that which bears both affirmation or negation is possible. So think of a coin. Any coin, one side of which is impossibility, the other side of it is necessity. Any coin, the one side of which is necessity, the other side of it is impossible. So 3 is greater than 2. Is that necessary, impossible, or possible? It's necessary, right? Speak up. There's a mic. You guys have a mic. You grab the mic, go and say it. So for the viewers at home.
It's necessary.
Right? It's necessary. 3 is greater than 2. Trust me, there are many trick questions that I'm setting you up just to mock you like mercilessly. This one was definitely not one of them. It's necessary, right? So then what's the other side of the coin? If 3 being greater than 2 is necessary, then 2 being greater than 3 is what? Impossible. So think of a coin. One side of it, of that coin, if there's necessity on one side, on the other side is impossibility. So if 2 statements cannot possibly exist at the same time, then you know you have an impossible situation. That jawaz is not there, right? So for example, I have one of my math teachers in school, if he's still alive, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give him hidayah and the good of this world. He's a decent and upright man. He had a door, the door from his classroom to like a computer lab. And so as a kind of a very math teachery type of joke, and I appreciate math teacher humor, he had a statement on one side of it. It says the statement on the other side of this door is true, and then on the other side it said the statement on the other side of this door is false. Now, can both of them exist at the same time? So one of them has to be correct, right? If they both can't be correct at the same time, can they both be incorrect at the same time?
No.
So it has to be one or the other. So, at any rate, anything that's necessary, if you invert the statement, it's going to make something that's impossible. Anything that's impossible, if you invert the statement, it will become necessary. So for example, what's something that's impossible? Rationally impossible. Someone's like, I won the lottery. No, it's impossible. A, it's haram. But B, because we're not talking about the fiqhi hukum right now. We're talking about the rational, the aqli hukum right now. Okay? The rational judgment with regards to it. If someone won the lottery, is that rationally necessary, impossible, or possible?
Possible.
It's possible. It's very remote likelihood. So much so that we'll metaphorically say it's impossible. But it is possible. What's something that's rationally impossible?
Four-sided triangle.
A four-sided triangle. Because by definition, a triangle has what?
3 sides.
3 sides, 3 angles, and then if it's a closed shape, it's going to end up being what? 3 sides. So a 4-sided triangle means that the fact that it's 4-sided means it cannot be a triangle. That's what? It's impossible. What if someone says there's no such thing as a 4-sided triangle? What is that? Is that statement necessarily true, impossible, or possible?
Necessarily.
Is necessarily true. Because the negation of something impossible is necessary. The negation of something that's necessary is?
Impossible.
Impossible. Again, this may seem like it's a lot of head banging for something that's not really beneficial or something that should be common sense for people, but common sense is not all that common, and it does help us to have a framework in which we're going to understand certain things shortly, which help a person to come to yaqeen with regards to not just the existence of Allah, but many other things. And so that thing that bears, that has a possible, both its affirmation and negation, we call that thing possible. So for example, what's a possible, it's possible. If I say my favorite color is black, this is possible. It's possible. It's also possible that it's not. I can still be I, my can still be my, favorite can still mean favorite, black can still mean black. And it might be true, and there's no, there's no negation of like any sort of fundamental reality in the world if it's true, and it might be untrue, in which case there's no fundamental negation of any reality in the world either, if it's untrue. So that's something that's jaiz, it's something that's possible. What I want a person to understand is that those things that you connect in order to take the knowledge you have with regards to the hukm aqli, the rational judgment with regards to something, in order to make an argument about something else, there's a form that you build, and that form can be internally consistent and it can also still be wrong. But if it's not consistent, it's impossible for that argument to be right. I'll give you an example, okay? Hamza is a turtle, and all turtles explore space. So if I say Hamza necessarily will explore space, this is an internally consistent rational argument. But Hamza isn't a turtle, Teenage Mutant Ninja or otherwise. And not only do all turtles not explore space, as far as I can tell, no turtles explore space as of yet. But someone wrongfully characterized something as being necessary and another thing being necessary, and then as a consequent link these two necessities in order to make a third thing necessary. But it's wrong. However, the syllogism, the form of the form of arranging these different pieces of information, the form was correct. Again, I'm not like a super mantiki guy. Okay, there may be some mantiki people right now having a heart attack and like sharpening their knives right now to stab me. By whoever you are, put your name in the comment section. Go take your mantik from them if they check out and they really know what they're talking about. I'm not anti-mantik and I'm not claiming anything. I'm just trying to. We're just talking about something very. It's remedial. It's remedial ilm al-kalam. We're only talking about enough mantik to get a person through the actual discussion, which has to do more with Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Deen, than it does with the actual study of mantik. I'm not a super mantiked up guy. So those super mantiki people, please, you can put your knives away, inshallah, and hopefully, I've driven you some business. Maybe you can give me some sort of kickback or some sort of commission, you know. So nowadays it's dollars for scholars, you know, and people are selling their deen for money or whatever. So maybe, you know, we can come to an arrangement as well. But the point is that that's a joke, by the way. I'm not selling anything. But the point is that again, if it's not, you know, if it's not like super like the best explanation of mantiq possible, don't kill me. Generally, the point is correct though. That something can be a syllogism, can be internally consistent, but also still be dead wrong. But if the syllogism isn't horrible, then if it's not consistent internally, then it can maybe tell you something is wrong rather than that it's right. And if it is correct, all the things inside are correct, the assumptions are correct on which the syllogism is built, it will probably tell you what the truth is. And we move on. And then finally he says, وَلِلضَّرُورِ وَالنَّظَرِ كُلٌّ قُسِمٍ. And then all of these three rational judgments, whether something's necessary, whether something is impossible, or whether it's impossible, those three judgments are of two types. They break up now of two types. That it can either be daruri or it can be nadari. Daruri is something that is plainly known at face value, prima facie. I didn't just say a cuss word, it's Latin. It means like at the first glance, you should know that this thing is correct. So for example, if it's noontime and we're outside on a clear day, and I say the sun is out, this statement is necessarily correct, and you can verify it very easily by just looking in the general direction of the sun. This gives rise to a very famous saying in Arabic. They say لا تصح في الأذهان شيء إذا احتاج النهار إلى الدليل, that nothing in the minds of people is functional if you tell them it's day and they say what's your dalil. You don't need a dalil, just look up, it's there. So those things that are daruri are things that are prima facie correct. Another word in mantiq, for those who study mantiq, they call these things badihi or badihiyat. Something that's badihi is something that's like just plainly self-evident. But so something can be necessary bid-darura, something can be impossible bid-darura, something can be possible bid-darura. It can be plainly evident. But it can also be nadari. Nadari means what? Something that's obtained through reflection, something that requires proof. So, for example, the fact that a triangle has 3 sides, it should be plainly evident to anyone who looks at a triangle. The fact that in a right triangle a squared plus b squared equals c squared every single time. This fact is something that's known through nadar. You have to have a proof. You have a set of very simple statements, all of which are themselves badihiyat, all of which themselves are badihiyat. You organize them and order them in such a way to show that a squared plus b squared will equal c squared every single time. So it's not that the thing that is self-evident is somehow more true than the thing that requires reflection or requires proof. But if something is necessary, it's necessary one way or the other. However, those things that require reflection and proof, require also more scrutiny, because there's more places where the internal rationality, the internal logic within the syllogism can break down, but within the proof can break down. So they require people to scrutinize them a little bit more. This is one of the reasons, although it's not really what we're talking about, but this is one of the reasons why takfir, the rule for takfir is somebody who denies something that is ma'lum min ad-dini bid-darura. It's that thing that's necessarily known from the deen, and it requires some sort of reflection. So bid-darura, it's, we say, for example, that it's not just a small difference of opinion to say someone who says that the Quran is created versus someone who says that the Quran is uncreated. But most of, if not most of the mutakallimun, they didn't make takfir of the Mu'tazila or those people who said that the Quran was created. Why? Because even though it's dead wrong, but not everybody has the ability to scrutinize the individual points that constitute the proof of that wrongness. And so a person can be forgiven for not being the most exacting logician, or not being the most exacting person in reason and verification of proofs in reason. Whereas something that is badihi, it's very plain and simple, and everybody knows, for example, that drinking wine is haram, or that eating pork is haram, or that lying, cheating, stealing is haram in general. Those are things that we won't accept proof. We won't accept any arguments about. Somebody who says that, for example, there's a prophet after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we cannot and will not accept any excuse for such a person. Such a person and their statement takes them outside of the fold of Islam. So this is a small primer on mantiq that will inshallah be a powerful tool for us to get through the reasoning involved in the rest of this remedial Kalām series. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala open our hearts and fill our hearts with nur and with ilm, the knowledge that He gave to those who He loves and He loved from the Anbiya alayhimu salatu wassalam, and from the awliya and salihin, and from our noble aslaf, our pious forebears. And may He light the path for us forward that leads us to His love and to Jannah. Wa sallallahu ta'ala ala rasulihi sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.